Webinar series brought to you by the Aries Foundation for Financial Education. Tonight, we're going to talk Social Securities and literally claiming strategies for Social Securities. Before we start up, a quick little checklist here. One of the things I'm going to start with is, for anybody in the audience, we apologize for the color scheme. We were choosing what we thought was a fall color, and it didn't really work. So just know we'll never use this color scheme again, but unfortunately for this presentation, this is what we're stuck with.
Well, it kind of looks like summer squash.
Yeah, well, see, I was trying for the fall thing. It just didn't work. Pilots for tonight. My name is Tom Alessi. I am the president of the Aries Foundation for Financial Education. I have been in financial services now for 23 years. I am an investment advisor. That means I act as a fiduciary whenever giving advice or guidance to any of my clients. As I said, I'm going to bring my vice president in. Craig, can you introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Craig Richardson. I've been in the financial services area for about 17 years. I specialize in working with families and small businesses to help them come up with personal financial plans so that they can achieve their future goals.
Appreciate that. And like I said, Craig will be chiming in as we go along, but he's also there in case questions pop up into the chat box. So as we said, this presentation is brought to you by the Aries Foundation for Financial Education. We're a nonprofit. You can check us out at www.ariesfoundation.org. The mission behind the Aries Foundation is trying to help everyone have a better relationship with their money. Because whether you realize it or not, you're in a relationship with your money. And just like every other personal relationship that you have, there are behaviors and emotional triggers that can cause us to act sometimes irrationally when it comes to our monies and finances. All right, that was a lot of wording for me. And now we get to the fun part of this. And the reason we call it Think with a Drink. So a lot of this stuff is, a little bit sometimes complex, sometimes convoluted, sometimes a little bit of doom and gloom. So we like to put a little bit, even though we try to keep it educational, a little bit relaxed and casual in terms of that. And we can't think of a better way to do it than if we have something cold and refreshing to sip on as we go along through the evening. For tonight's beverage, I have chosen Timber Yard Brewing. They're in East Brookfield, Mass, if you've never heard of them. And since I was trying to do a fall theme with this, I've got their Oktoberfest for this evening. Craig, what are you drinking tonight?
I actually have a selection from our friends at Scout and Cellar. I'm drinking a Fieldhouse white wine blend.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's going to the wine route. So I'm going to pour this and say to everybody out there, hopefully you have something cold and refreshing to sip along as well. And we're thinking, but you got to look at what's happened in the past and where we were to what's come from and where we're at now in terms of Social Security. So before it used to be 65, right? 65 was the number. And, we did this whole thing on retirement where it's usually the number one question that we get from everybody, right? If we ask the question, when are you going to retire? Or when you were thinking about retire, at what age do you want to retire? The knee-jerk response is always 65. And that's because that's what it was before. At 65, people would get a pension. They'd have Social Security. They have guaranteed health care in the case of Medicare for the rest of their life. They'd get a gold watch and a lawn chair. That's basically what retirement used to be. All of these are factors that play into making some of these decisions. And that's really what this is about having the conversation and sort of understanding what happens when you claim and how you can we are living longer. The statistic from last year in 2020 is that a healthy couple, age 55, that the average life expectancy for the female is going to be 89, for a male is going to be 87. That's average life expectancy. And Craig, what does average mean?
Average means the middle. It means some people will die sooner and some people will live longer.
Right. So just realize the likelihood that if you were healthy at 55, that one of you probably is going to live into your 90s. Social Security, if you've never talked to Social Security, or if it's something that you're looking at that's going to be coming up, they love, like every other governmental agency, to throw acronyms at you, right? So there's acronyms for everything, but the two main ones are FRA, which is full retirement age. And we'll talk about what the qualification is for full retirement age in a couple of slides. And then PIA, which is your primary insurance amount, which is what you get on a monthly basis. That's what everything is based off. When we look at claiming, now this is for somebody whose primary insurance, whose FRA, you can see the red box in the middle of the page, is 66. So this would have been somebody born in 1954. So if you were born in 1954, your FRA is 66 years old. That's where your primary insurance amount in this particular case would be $1,600 a month at your FRA. If you choose to claim earlier, less than your FRA, for every year that you are early, you can start claiming at 62, but it's going to deduct the benefit amount by 6.25% every year. So that if you look at it, if you go and if you said this was me, I was my FRA was 66, I could claim 1,600 at that age, but I've chosen to take my benefit at age 62, I'm only going to get 1,200 a month.
A very tiny mulligan.
Correct.
Hey, I have a question from the audience, from Patty, who's asking, is there a break-even year? And I think if we've done the math on this, it's what, about 13 and a half years, 14 years, somewhere in that neighborhood?
Exactly. So if you do it out, if you say, and really, Patty, what we're doing, when you do that, the only way to really sort of look at it from a truly apples to apples type of view is to say, I took the benefit early and I just poured all that money into a bucket. Let's call it bucket A.
Mhm.
And instead of doing that, I waited to FRA and I took all that benefit and I poured it into bucket B. It, as Craig said, if your full retirement age was 66, at about 77, and it's like 7 months, somewhere in there, 78 or so, bucket B has more money for the US.
I got another question in the chat box, buddy. I have someone asking, I was born in 1959. What is my early age and full retirement age?
So I'm happy you asked that, because we're going to slide right into the slide that's going to answer that question for you. We didn't prop that in, but so if you are born from 1943 to 1954, your FRA is 66. Just realize that for anybody born from 55 to 1959, all you do is take an extra 2 months for every year. So in the case if you were born in 1959, your FRA is 66 and 10 months. You are right at the edge of the, where we are for the rest of the world born after 1960, which is 67. All right, so let's talk, when we talk about claiming, there's 4 things you need to be thinking about. Sort of, I'm going to say them, and Craig and I sort of use this as 4 concepts to be thinking of when you're looking at when am I going to claim or how am I going to claim, right? And so the first one is the earning limit. And we're going to talk about that. We'll break them each down, but it's every year Social Security allows you to earn X amount of dollars before there's a penalty assessed on your benefits. And we'll break it down and go through that with you in terms of how that works. The types of income that counts for earnings. So you got to be aware of what counts or what doesn't count for those earnings limits if you're trying to collect and work at the same time. What happens prior to reaching my FRA if I decide I want to collect and still work? How does that all shake out? Mm-hmm. And then what happens in the year that I'm going to turn is 66 or 67, depending on your FRA. So the earnings limit, very simply, if it's prior to your full retirement age, so let's just use 66 as the example, right? So if you are younger than 66, and you decide that you want to collect Social Security, but you're still working, Social Security says you are allowed to have an income of $18,960. And if you are at that or below it, then you can collect the full amount that you are entitled to from Social Security. The penalty for going over that number is $1 for every two that you are over the limit. And I'll break it down. We'll go through an example with you and break that down. But it's essentially for every $2 you are over that $18,960, Social Security is going to deduct $1 from your benefits.
Now you're doing math. It's like I have 5 apples and I gave Johnny 3 apples. How many apples do I have left? Right.
Yeah. What happened if somebody snuck in and stole one of my apples while I was doing the math?
And then I ate the other one. So
Yeah. By the way, we have a word for that when somebody comes in and takes something from you that you weren't expecting. We call it taxation. All right. So then in the year that you are turning FRA, so again, 66. So it's I'm going to be 66 sometime this year. I can actually earn up to $50,260. And the penalty changes. It goes from, instead of every $1 for every 2 I'm over, now it's $1 for every 3 I'm over. Types of income that are counted when we're looking at that earnings limit is really just W-2 wages, what you're getting paid by your employer, or if you have self-employment, 1099 income, some sort of a side hustle or gig, you're a consultant, you get paid by somebody else. Those are really just about the only 2 earnings limits.
got a question from the
Huh?
got a question from the audience, Tom. Said, so this one is says, so I'm just barely past my FRA, would have fulfilled it in May. Does that mean I can claim benefits and earn as much as I want without a penalty?
So I am going to answer that as yes and no. Okay? So not to be really, in terms of going through that with you, but here's the thing. So the answer is yes. So once you pass FRA, the penalty, the earnings limit thing, the lid gets pulled off. We have a slide later that just says it. That's all it is. It's just that there's no limit, there's no earning. You could make $1 million. They're still going to pay you your full benefit amount. The reason I say no, and we're going to talk about it as we get through this, they're going to tax you on your benefits. And let's look at just an example to sort of go through this, because you have to do some math. As Greg said, there's some math that gets involved, which is why this gets a little complex or convoluted for a lot of people. But let's take somebody who's 63. They were born on September 1st. They're earning $40,000 a year. They filed for benefits at 62. However, their FRA, their PIA amount would have been $2,400. But because they filed at 62, it's 25% less. They're only getting $1,800 a month, but they're working and getting $1,800 a month. That's how this works. Okay. So now what happens now that they, prior to FRA for them? Well, you got to do the math. The first thing you got to do is you got to calculate what the monthly earnings limit is. It's not an annual thing. It's a monthly number for Social Security, because Social Security pays you out monthly. So you got to take the 18,960 and divide by 12. Get 1,580, 1,580. That's sort of your monthly allowance, if you will, that you can earn. You take your monthly income that you're earning, say it's W-2 income, that's 40,000, which divided by 12 is 3333333, right? So in terms of going through that, I take the 3333, I minus the 1,580 monthly income minus the allowable equals what I'm over. And when I do that, I get an overage of 867. Again, it's $1 for every 2 over that I earn, which means that my benefit is going to get deducted by 867. I'm getting $1,800 a month in the example, minus the 867 leaves me with a benefit number of. What happens when we're in the year of FRA, right? So this is now I'm turning 66 this year, right? I can earn up to 50,520. Well, again, same thing. I got to divide that number by 12, and I get 4,210 a month. In the previous, the example of the individual that we had before, they were less than 4,210 a month, so they could collect in their year of FRA their full salary and get their full benefit with no penalty. But again, the penalty is $1 for every 3 that you're over. So
So I have two questions for you, Tom. One's in the chat box. It says, so if I'm still working full-time until age 67 or 68 and I'm healthy, I shouldn't claim, right?
oh, if you want me to answer that, I'm going to say yes. And the main reason for that is I'm going to come up in 2 screens with that, as to why. It's more to do with you can get the benefit, but you're going to trigger a tax on your benefits.
Okay.
And the tax is going to get levied. It's probably going to be very heavy, depending on what you're earning. And it might not make sense then to say, well, why am I taking the benefit if I'm going to be paying taxes on it? And oh, by the way, when we get to it, because we'll touch on briefly Medicare, how that may impact your Medicare premium as well. So, and then, so like we said, the question that came earlier, so I'm going to spend time here, but if you've achieved FRA, then you're over and above. So one of the things I do want to say that and bring back to on this, with this whole thing about the penalty, right, that you could lose some of that benefit, like in the example we gave, they would lose $867. That money is actually not lost. Yes, they take it away from your monthly benefit, but it actually gets tacked on. You can actually claim that later. They'll stretch it out over your quick. Below FRA, again, this year it's $18,960. Next year it'll go up again. $1 for every 2 over the limit. In the year of FRA, it's $50,520. $1 for every 3 that you're over the limit. And once you hit the month of your FRA or beyond, 0. You can earn as much as you want. There is no penalty to your benefit. All right, so here's the reason that you would not, and this is the answer to that question. This is the no side of why you would not file now if you are past FRA, still working and healthy. Besides the fact that your benefit amount keeps going up and you're earning, but the other is that your Social Security benefit gets taxed. And it gets taxed anywhere up to 85% of the benefit amount based on what you earn, right? So if you're a single filer and you earn more than $25,000 in a year, then your benefit is going to get taxed at 50%. And that $25,000, unlike the earnings limit where it just looked at W-2 or 1099, now brings all that other stuff into it. It brings pensions and retirement accounts and dividends and anything that you've paid income taxes on. And so for most of us, that's our retirement accounts, right? I'm pulling money out of my retirement account because that's what it's there for, so I can live in my retirement. But now that's generating taxable income to me, and I've got taxable income, so Social Security is going to look at that and say, well, hey, if you're over that amount, we're going to take some of that benefit away in the form of taxes.
So that's why having a good liquidation strategy is so important.
It's absolutely necessary to figure it out. We'll talk about it the last slide before we get into, to close it out, is all the things that don't, is what we were talking about there in terms of, so one of the things with Medicare is in the same conversation, right? So when you talk about Social Security going broke, the other thing that's going broke is Medicare. Medicare is under more pressure because the paying into it is a lot less. And there's more and more people using the services of Medicare because everybody gets it when they turn 65 than Social Security. So there's a lot of pressure on it. And that number is like 2032 right now. So you're going to see some tweaking here with this. One of the things that Medicare has not done is they charge a surcharge if you have too much income in your retirement years. And they haven't changed them. These numbers have stayed the same for the past decade. And what Medicare just said was originally they were going to make an assessment and a change in 2024. They've delayed that to 2028. So these are that modified adjusted gross income, right? So what increases that modified, that's how Medicare and all of that is looked at. So again, it's Social Security, it's salary, it's pensions, it's required minimum distributions, dividends, capital gains, anything from a retirement account, and those distributions from municipal bonds. Even though they were tax-free, if you take a distribution from it, they're going to count it against Medicare. What doesn't count is any life insurance that you have, non-qualified annuities, i.e. annuities that are not under an IRA umbrella retirement account, health savings accounts, which are a triple tax benefit, because not only are you putting the money away, getting a tax on it, but then you can take it out and have it be tax-free here and then not count against anything. So HSAs are wonderful tools. Roths. So always important to look at what you can do with a Roth and maybe start looking at where your current tax rate is, and maybe could I take a little bit of a conversion in this year and I'm not triggering too much of a tax penalty, but I'm building up this Roth portfolio that I can use to withdraw money from. Longevity insurance, that's just deferring payments. That's like turning on your own personal pension type of thing. Like I've got these deferred payments that are coming from an annuity that's going to pay me on a monthly basis. I don't get taxed as much on that. And a reverse mortgage, there's another thing that doesn't count in terms of going through it.
Just to give you a heads up, Tom, we're at 6:24.
Okay.
So a lot of information though, and a lot of
I know
interest.
there's a lot, and we try to keep these as quickly as possible, but right at the end, right? This is where we are in terms of the end, right? So for us, again, the Aries Foundation is always about trying to help everybody, sort of figure out what's ahead, right? Because that's the whole idea. Nobody knows the twists and turns that are coming, and it's our goal is to try to help everybody sort of get that clear vision of where they want to be, how they want to get there. And in this case, when we're talking about Social Security and how that's going to affect it, how am I going to claim that? And as Craig said, how am I going to be efficient with taking the money out? As we said to you, one of the things that we are offering to everybody who's on the call here tonight, the webinar, that we'll do a free analysis with you. Basically all you got to do is if you just type yes into the chat box, we'll reach out to you and we'll set that up. It's a simple little questionnaire that just asks some health questions, right? Because you got to know about longevity, but then about where you're at, what you're trying to do, and when your qualification would come and what that would look like. So we're happy to do it. There's no cost, there's no obligation. It's a free tool it'll line that up. It'll line up not only Social Security, but Medicare in terms of how that all is going to work.
Well,
And then if you ever have questions, you can always reach out to us. It's info@ariesfoundation.org, or you can go to the website. There's a contact form on there. And as Craig said, you can check out some of the workshop titles, some of the stuff we do. There's a blog page. We've got our YouTube channel that you can check out some of the titles that we've done and check those out. But you can go to www.ariesfoundation.org. And that's going to wrap us up.
but you've got to put your hands on the side of your head like this first so it doesn't grow. Is how are you so awesome? That's the question we got. I don't want your head getting too big, so you got to squeeze it.
I certainly appreciate that feedback, and thank you very much. So like I said, for Craig and I, between the two of us, we've been doing this now for more than 40 years combined.